Hi Year 9, it's Mrs. Ali. So today we are going to be looking at the poem Kamikaze by Beatrice Garland. For that you will need your remote learning booklet, the poem itself, and a pen and paper to make notes. So let's go through the answers. So number 1, the language technique used for the phrase mind forged manacles is a metaphor. Number 2, a standard sonnet has 14 lines, so think about the poem Ozymandias here. Number 3, Blake, Shelley and Wordsworth all have in common that they are romantic poets and they all celebrate nature. And number 4, there are 3 voices in the poem Ozymandias. There is the traveller, the person telling the story about meeting the traveller, and Ozymandias himself. So for this slide, we want to know, what do you think? Okay, so the word kamikaze, what does it mean? Have you come across it before? And in what context have you heard it? Can you apply it to this poem? What do you think kamikaze pilots were used for in World War II? And what big ideas will be explored in the poem? Just take a couple of minutes now to jot down your thoughts and ideas. Now that you have some ideas jotted down, do they match up with some of these answers here? Okay, so the word kamikaze means divine wind in Japanese, but it actually used to mean suicidal action. Okay, so that brings us on to the next question about what you think kamikaze pilots were used for in World War II. So Japanese pilots in World War II deliberately crashed their aeroplanes into enemy ships. And what big ideas do you think will be explored? So you can have anything down for this, but I've just put 2 things. So the poem might explore thoughts and feelings of a kamikaze pilot and the actions or rituals to become a kamikaze pilot as well. For this activity, you will be making predictions based on the images on this slide. You should take no longer than 5 minutes. So the photos were taken in Japan during World War II. They depict kamikaze soldiers and the impact of their missions. So as you know from the previous slide, they were pilots who crashed their planes into ships or into enemy ships. So using these images, you need to consider what else the soldiers had to deal with other than the thought of their mission. How might the soldiers have been feeling when they were sent on their mission? And how do you think the families and the government viewed soldiers who did not fulfill their mission? This next activity should take no longer than 5 minutes. What you will need to do is read through the 3 paragraphs on the poet Beatrice Garland and then summarize it in your own words in 4 bullet points. For this activity, you will need to read through the slides which will show you the newspaper article on 2 kamikaze pilots. You will need to read the article and highlight any words or phrases, sentences used to describe the feelings of the pilot. Now that you have read the article about the kamikaze pilots, what you will need to do is fill in this grid. It should only take you about 15 minutes. If it takes you a little bit less time or longer, again, that's absolutely fine. Don't worry about it. So what you will need to do in the 3 boxes is summarize what the article is saying about the experiences of a kamikaze pilot. You need to pick a quotation from the article which describes the feelings of the pilot and complete single word analysis on the language used. And the last one, you need to complete the activities at the beginning of the booklet. Write down everything you have learned about kamikaze pilots in full sentences. There is an actual video on this slide. It is a reading of the poem, so please just hover over it and press play. Like I have said, it is a reading of the poem and it comes up as colour coded. So if you have the poem in front of you and would like to colour code it and annotate it at the same time, that's absolutely fine. The poem itself is on the next slide.
Kamikaze by Beatrice Garland. Her father embarked at sunrise with a flask of water, a samurai sword in the cockpit, a shaven head full of powerful incantations, and enough fuel for a one-way journey into history. But halfway there, she thought, recounting it later to her children, he must have looked far down at the little fishing boats strung out like bunting on a green-blue translucent sea, and beneath them, arcing in swathes like a huge flag, waved first one way, then the other in a figure of 8, the dark shoals of fishes, flashing silver as their bellies swivelled towards the sun, and remembered how he and his brothers, waiting on the shore, built cairns of pearl-grey pebbles to see whose withstood longer the turbulent inrush of breakers, bringing their father's boat safe, yes, grandfather's boat, safe to the shore, salt-sodden, awash with cloud-marked mackerel, black crabs, feathery prawns, the loose silver of whitebait, and once a tuna, the dark prince, muscular, dangerous. And though he came back, my mother never spoke again in his presence, nor did she meet his eyes, and the neighbours too. They treated him as though he no longer existed. Only we children still chattered and laughed, till gradually we too learned to be silent, to live as though he had never returned, that this was no longer the father we loved. And sometimes, she said, he must have wondered which had been the better way to die.
For this activity, you need to make sure you have read the poem and listened to the reading of it. You will also need to make sure that you have access to the link that is provided to you on this slide. You then need to answer all 3 questions. It should be no longer than 10 minutes to complete this task. So for this task, you have to complete the Diamond 9. You need to place the words on the slide and arrange them into a Diamond 9. So to do this, you need to place what you think the poem is most about at the top, place what you think the poem is least about at the bottom, and if you want to include a new word in your 9, you can, but you must explain why you disregarded the other word. So the words you have to pick from are honour, cowardice, disgrace, home, fear, family, nostalgia, memories, and death. Here is an example of what your Diamond 9 could look like. It does not mean that it should look like this. So remember, the word that you place at the top is what you think the poem is most about, and the one that you put at the bottom is what you think the poem is least about. And if you do switch a word from there, that's absolutely fine. Just remember to explain. So for the next few slides, we are going to be annotating the poem. We will be doing this somewhat together. So what you will need is the poem in front of you, your remote learning booklet, and paper and pen to make notes. This should take us around 40 minutes to complete. Okay, so as we are now annotating the poem, I wanted to go through the first stanza with you. I have also colour coded it and given you a key to tell you what each colour means. Now, we'll go through the questions together. So why does Garland use the verb embarked in the first line? Okay, it has a double meaning. It can mean getting on a plane or going on an adventure. So why do we think this has been said or used? Number 2, why does Garland use listing in the second and third lines? So a flask of water, a samurai sword, cockpit, a shaven head. What could this suggest? What do you do when you are going on a journey? Okay, you tend to list things that you need to do or you need to have with you. So what effect does the sixth line have on the reader? What does it tell us about the pilot and his thoughts prior to taking his flight? Journey into history. So this could suggest that it sounds quite pleasant and it has a sense of achievement and pride at making history, and that this person will never be forgotten. So this journey that they are taking, they are proud to do it. Number 4, why does Garland use the word incantations? What effect does this have? Now, incantations was a part of a ritual to prepare themselves. Okay, so it was kind of like a prayer for them. What could it tell us about the cultural expectations? I'll let you figure that one out. Now, number 5, why are we informed that the pilot only has enough fuel for one way? How might this create a sinister tone? The fact that it's only one way suggests death. Okay, it implies that they will die on this journey. They're not coming back. Why is that quite sinister? What do you think about that? Moving on to the second stanza, the daughter is explaining what her father sees on his journey in the plane. She is speaking to her own children here, and we can see there are multiple generations recounting the tale. So the words recounting and children and she thought, okay, these are part of the traditions and cultures where stories are passed on to generations and generations. So think about that. Why could that be important? What does that suggest about Japanese culture or culture in general? Okay, if you look at question 4, are the daughter's memories / details of the story completely reliable? So highlight a quotation to back up your ideas. Think about the words she thought. Okay, it doesn't actually tell us what her father is thinking. It tells us what she is thinking about that. It's her imagining this now. Why does Garland use the pronoun he instead of naming the kamikaze pilot? Why has he become nameless? What can it suggest about him if he does not complete his mission? Okay, what are the connotations of bunting? So bunting is the string which normally has triangles on it, so sometimes it could have words or it's quite colourful. So when are those normally used and what is the effect of this? The daughter goes on to list the finer details of what was seen, especially the fish that he sees whilst looking down into the vast ocean. So whilst we are answering these 5 questions, you need to be annotating at the same time. So number 1, how does Garland reference patriotism here and what device does she use to do it? Now remember, if you are patriotic, okay, you have a love for your country and you would more than likely fight for your country and its freedom. So think about that. What do we normally use to show that we are patriotic? Think about the word flag here. Okay, going to move on to number 3. So what do you think the shoals could symbolize? The narrator suggests that the natural beauty may have discouraged the pilot from completing his mission potentially. So think about that as well. The enjambment continues here again. Why do we think that happens? Remember, as written in the previous slide, enjambment is when the lines roll off one another. Okay, there's no punctuation to stop that line. Number 5, why compare the image of a flag to the movements of the fish? What could Garland be mocking here? So for this stanza, the narrator then adds in an anecdote, so a personal story, obviously shared with her by her father. He reminisces on memories that he shared with his father, the narrator's grandfather. So what you are going to do here is you are going to continue to annotate by answering these questions. So think about the word remembered. Okay, it's a reminder of the pilot's childhood. Okay, and you also have Ken's, so pile of pebbles and stones that act as a memorial or safety or directions for walkers. So think about that. Why is it ironically used? Okay, and then you have the two words turbulent and safe. They juxtapose each other. And then we also have a lack of punctuation. So it could be the pilot recalling his childhood memories which overtake his ability to complete his mission. Now when you are looking at the last line of the stanza, so bringing their father's boat safe, is he actually returning home safely? Is that ironic because that's not what his mission is actually about? The poem takes a darker, more sinister tone here, showing that death is following the father. The sound of the sea is also emulated here as the narrator lists items her father had seen. So let's go through some of the questions. Number 1, why place yes, grandfather's boat in parenthesis? This is when you have a word or phrase inserted as an explanation. It's normally through brackets, dashes, or commas. So why is that in parenthesis there? What is the effect of this? Okay. Number 2, how does Garland use sibilants in this stanza? So remember, sibilants is the continuing S sounding words. So shore, salt, sodden, awash. Okay. It gives the effect of being read like a nursery rhyme. So why could this be significant? Okay, what is significant about the fish imagery? How can it be seen as metaphorical? So consider the purpose of fishing. You may want to add this in after completing activity 6, so you can leave question 3 until a little bit later. Okay, why place a full stop after dangerous? What does that actually make you do when you're reading? It makes you pause, doesn't it? So what is the effect of that? And number 5, why juxtapose the idea of simple fisherman with that of a kamikaze pilot? What is the effect of that? Nearing the end of the poem, it becomes evident that the pilot returned home from his mission after viewing nature and realizing that life is more important than death. On his return, he was isolated and secluded by his family, as it was seen as a dishonor to not fulfill your mission. The children, to begin with, still treat their father in the same way as before. So as we are annotating, we are also answering the questions. So number 1, why did the speaker's mother not speak again? Why did she not speak to her husband who has come back from this war journey? Is it because she is ashamed of him because he did not complete the mission that was supposed to bring great pride and honour to their family? Number 2, with the way that the neighbours treat the pilot, where they treated him as though he no longer existed, what does that tell us about Japanese society? Is it that they took great pride and honour in their country and their missions, and to not complete it was a very severe punishment because there was no fulfillment from that? Okay. Number 3, why does Garland try to make the final line where the children chatted and laughed? What point is being made here? Is it that they are innocent and they are not understanding of the impact that he has caused on their family? Number 4, at which point does Garland use pauses? So where are the commas and why? So think about where the commas have been used and the effect of them, and then complete number 5 independently. To complete annotating the poem, we still have to answer the 7 questions as annotations. Okay, so the information we are given is, as time went on, the children, so the narrator, also learnt to ignore their father and see him as a failure. The father is then made to question whether it would be better for him to have died and be honourable, or to live and be ignored. For this final slide, complete the questions as annotations, and then you are done for annotating the poem. On the next slide, there is a YouTube video of an interview between Mr. Bruff and Beatrice Garland herself. The video touches on what inspired Garland to write the poem, the history behind the Kamikaze pilots, and the structure of the poem. So to do this, you will need to complete the table in your remote learning booklets. It is extremely useful for you, especially because of the contextual links that you are able to make. So please do this now. If you are unable to watch the video on this slide, please click on the link that is provided and watch the interview between Mr. Bruff and Beatrice Garland. What you will need to do for this activity, which you have done a few times now, is consider the big ideas explored in the poem Kamikaze. You need to pick the top 5 you think apply to the poem and briefly explain your choices. So 1 or 2 sentences will be enough. There may be more than 5 themes that you feel apply to the poem, but for simplicity's sake, please pick 5. If you want, you can check your answers at the back of the booklet and adjust them if you feel you need to. So here are the top 5 themes that have been picked for you. So we have the power of nature, the effects of conflict, loss and absence, identity, and individual experience. Now you have read the poem, add notes explaining why you think it has the title Kamikaze in its simplest form. Try and think of at least 3 ideas. Also, this poem appears in the Power and Conflict cluster of your GCSE anthology. Where are power and conflict seen in Kamikaze? Try and avoid the obvious, like the poem is all about war, which is a form of conflict. Okay, so try to come up with your own ideas and add your notes around the title. And that's it, guys. Well done. You should have completed the booklet. Please remember to hand in any work that your teacher asks you to submit, and great job.